the shell that sang the sea. In the sleepy coastal town of Windmere by the sea, summer evenings arrived like a sigh. The sky, painted in ribbons of peach and lavender, hung low over the gently curling tide. Children played their last games of tag before bed. Seagulls called lazily from the cliffs, and the scent of honeysuckle drifted down from the hills beyond. Lila stood where the water kissed the sand, her toes buried in the damp shore. She was 8 years old, with a mop of windswept hair the color of driftwood and eyes the soft green of sea glass. In her hand, she carried a small woven basket filled with beach treasures. A striped feather, a chunk of smooth quartz, 2 perfect scallop shells, and a piece of deep blue sea glass. It had been a long, slow day, the kind Lila loved. Her grandmother, whom she called Nanny, had taken her to the market that morning, where they bought ripe peaches and rosemary bread. They picnicked under the old fig tree in the garden, read from a book of sea myths, and dozed in the shade during the warmest hours. Now, as the tide drew out and the stars began to wink into view, Lila searched for one last treasure before heading home. "One more shell," she murmured, walking slowly, eyes scanning the sand. Just then, something shimmered in the low tide. Not a flash, but a quiet gleam like moonlight caught in a puddle. Lila knelt, brushing the sand aside. There it was, a spiral shell unlike any she had ever seen. It wasn't bright or colorful, but it glowed faintly with a pearlescent sheen as if lit from within. She picked it up and felt a surprising warmth in her palm. "What are you?" she whispered. The wind shifted, carrying the distant sound of waves and something else, something softer, like humming. Lila glanced around. The beach was empty. The sound wasn't from the sea. She brought the shell to her ear, and the world fell away. It wasn't just the echo of the ocean inside the shell. It was a melody, gentle, rising and falling like waves. Notes danced through her thoughts, calm and familiar, though she'd never heard them before. The melody was a voice without words. It wrapped around her like a blanket, warm and safe. Lila sat back, her basket forgotten. "You're singing," she breathed. The shell vibrated softly against her skin. She didn't notice how long she sat there, listening. The sun dipped below the horizon and stars bloomed overhead. The tide crept closer again. A voice called down the beach. "Lila, time to come in, darling." Nanny's voice. Lila stood slowly, cradling the shell. "Coming." But as she walked back up the path toward the cottage, her fingers closed around the glowing shell. She knew something had changed. The sea had sung to her, and she intended to listen. That night, tucked beneath a quilt stitched with waves and stars, Lila couldn't sleep. The shell rested on her nightstand, glowing faintly in the dark room. A warm summer breeze carried the scent of salt through the open window, and the song still lingered in her ears, a lullaby that seemed to echo from inside her dreams. "You found something special today," Nanny had said after dinner, noticing the shell in her hand. "There are some shells, you know, that carry old sea magic. Not everyone can hear them." "Sea magic?" Lila had asked, wide-eyed. Nanny only smiled. "Sleep well, little fish. Tomorrow's another day to discover." But sleep didn't come quickly. Every time Lila closed her eyes, she saw herself floating. Not just in thought, but truly floating, as though the melody in the shell had lifted her above the sea and carried her somewhere beyond. Eventually, when the stars were high and the crickets sang their soft summer chorus, Lila reached out, touched the shell, and whispered, "Will you sing again?" She brought it to her ear. The tune returned, gentler this time. And then, just as her eyes began to close, she felt something shift. The air around her turned thick and soft, like drifting through warm mist. She wasn't lying in her bed anymore. She was floating. Her blanket was gone, replaced by a soft current that cradled her like a boat. Below her, the sea shimmered, glowing with silver light. Above her, stars blinked slowly, as if watching. She drifted past dolphins that danced in moonbeams, their fins slicing through glassy water. Jellyfish glowed in hues of rose and gold. Even the seaweed swayed gently to the rhythm of the song, like dancers in a slow parade. A great sea turtle paddled close, eyes wise and kind. "Welcome, Lila," he said, his voice slow and deep, like the tide. Lila blinked in awe. "You know my name?" "The sea knows many names. Yours is one it remembers." She reached out to touch his shell. It felt ancient and comforting. "Where am I?" "Some call it the dreaming deep," the turtle said. "Others, the whispering current. But you are safe. This is a place for those who listen." Lila wanted to ask more, but her eyes were growing heavy. "Rest now," the turtle said. "The sea will sing you home." And it did. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window in golden shafts, and the scent of baking bread wafted from the kitchen. Lila stirred slowly, blinking at the ceiling. The shell was still on her nightstand, its surface cool now, but she swore it glimmered when she touched it. Downstairs, Nanny hummed softly as she sliced peaches. "Sleep well, little fish?" "I think so," Lila said cautiously. "I had a dream, but it felt more like I went somewhere." Nanny said, eyes twinkling. "Sometimes dreams take us places more real than the day, especially when the sea is singing." Lila sat at the table, swinging her feet. "There was a turtle. He knew my name. He called it the Dreaming Deep." Nanny paused, setting down the knife. "A turtle, you say?" Lila nodded. "He said it was a place for listeners." For a long moment, Nanny was quiet. Then she opened a drawer and pulled out something wrapped in a faded silk scarf. She placed it gently on the table. Inside was a shell, spiral, glowing faintly. Lila gasped. "You have one too. I found mine when I was a little older than you. The sea has always sung to the women in our family. Not every night, not always clearly, but it's there." Lila looked down at her shell. "Why doesn't everyone hear it?" "Some people forget how to listen," Nanny said softly. "Too busy, too loud inside. But those with quiet hearts and curious minds, the sea remembers them." Lila's chest warmed with something like pride. "Tonight," Nanny said, "we'll go to the shore after supper. There are places where the song is louder." Lila beamed. "Really? Really? But you must promise me something. Anything. Always treat the sea's gift with kindness. Its magic is gentle but deep." Lila reached out and took her grandmother's hand. "I promise." And that night, under a moonful and low, the sea sang louder than it ever had before. The next few days passed like pages in a dream. Lila and Nanny returned to the moon pool each night. The tide and moon allowed, and each time, the song grew clearer. It didn't use words, but it told stories of coral kingdoms, of ancient storms, of whales who remembered the stars. Lila began to feel as though she had known the ocean for 1,000 summers. One afternoon, as the sky shimmered with heat and the cicadas buzzed in chorus, Lila wandered along the cliffs beyond the garden. Her shell was tucked safely in her pocket, humming faintly. She climbed to the highest rock and looked out across the sea, waves twinkling like glass. She sat cross-legged and took out the shell. "I wish I could go there again," she whispered. "To the Dreaming Deep, to talk to the turtle." A breeze answered, soft but steady. The shell pulsed. Suddenly, the cliffs, the town, the shore all seemed to dissolve. The world around her shimmered and shifted until she was floating once more in the warm, glowing sea. She drifted downward this time, not up, drawn toward a golden reef shaped like a spiral. The turtle awaited her, resting near the reef. "You've come further," he said. "It wasn't a dream, was it?" "No," the turtle said gently. "It's a door. And now you're learning to open it on your own." The reef pulsed with colors, violet, teal, amber, as schools of luminous fish swept by in unison. Lila was speechless. "You have the sea's gift, Lila," the turtle continued. "But the sea gives slowly, and with purpose. Listen carefully, watch patiently, and trust what you feel. Will I always be able to come here? As long as you listen." He began to turn, motioning with a flipper. "Come, there are more who wish to meet you." They traveled together through watery tunnels of light, past slumbering giants of the deep. Whales, squid, and glowing sea dragons. Finally, they arrived at a place like no other, a cathedral of coral where shells hung like chimes and the currents themselves carried melodies. A group of figures gathered there, gentle beings shaped like light and water. They had no eyes or mouths, but they sang. And somehow Lila understood them. "The girl who hears," they sang. "The child who listens. The one who remembers." Their song wrapped around her, weaving through her thoughts until she felt it settle deep in her chest. She didn't need to ask questions anymore. She simply listened. And the sea sang back. The days and nights flowed softly. Lila grew more attuned to the shell's melodies and their meanings. She began recording the tunes in her sketchbook, waves drawn in ink, spirals with tiny notations, words that rhymed like old sea poems. The sea's stories began to shape her own. One morning, Nanny gave her a gift, a notebook bound in soft leather, embossed with the image of a shell. "To hold the songs you hear," Nanny said, "and those you make." That night, as she listened once more beside the moon pool, something new entered the melody. A note that was not part of the sea's usual voice. It was higher, more hurried. "Help," it sang. Lila sat up straighter. The turtle emerged from the shadows. "The tide brings many voices," he said. "Tonight, it brings one in need." Lila didn't hesitate. "Where are they?" The turtle turned. "Follow the current. In a shimmer, Lila was floating again, her shell glowing like a lantern. She swam through the dreaming deep, faster than ever before, until she came upon a tangled patch of coral and shadow. There, nestled in seaweed, was a tiny creature, a sea sprite, no larger than Lila's hand, its light flickering weakly. "Oh," Lila whispered. She reached out gently, and the sprite clung to her fingers. Lost, it sang softly, far from the shoals. Lila tucked it close to her heart and followed the music back. The turtle was waiting, his eyes solemn but kind. "Even the sea gets lost sometimes," he said. Together, they returned the sprite to its home in a glimmering patch of reef filled with others like it. They sang a song of thanks, thin, silver melodies that drifted upward like bubbles. That night, as she returned to her bed, the shell's song was different again. It was full. It sang not only of the sea, but of friendship, of kindness, and of a girl who had answered when the ocean called. Many seasons passed in Windmere by the sea. The sun still painted the sky in peach and lavender, and the tide still whispered secrets to the shore. But now, when the sea sang, it sang a little clearer, because someone was listening. And sometimes, if you walked the beach in the quiet of a summer evening, you might find a girl with driftwood hair and sea glass eyes, sitting with a glowing shell at her ear. And if you listened closely, you just might hear the sea sing too.